So the main two types of plyometric exercises which we have are extensive and intensive. And when you understand the difference between these two types of plyometrics, everything else will become pretty much self-explanatory, but we still have to know the difference between the two in order to know how to actually use the other categories as well. At the top we have extensive plyometrics. These, I like to split them, or I like to differentiate them by a lot of people like to separate them by intensity, but extensive and intensive plyometrics can both be really high intensity. So I like to split them or differentiate them by contact type or ground contact time. Extensive plyometrics are usually exercises which have shorter ground contact times, which are done for higher repetitions. This will be things like pogo jumps, single leg hops, bounce, and things which you do repetitively for rhythm, for coordination, and for, let's say, fluidity. At the bottom we have intensive plyometrics. These are longer ground contact time plyometrics which are done for higher effort, higher perceived effort, which focus on generating maximum power through the hips, through the knees, through the ankles, and in general through the joints, muscles, tissues. You are just going to generate maximum force with these type of exercises. These are things like broad jumps, vertical jumps, max effort box jumps, or every type of vertical, broad, lateral jump you can think of, which is really max effort. Now, what's the difference between the two? Yeah, we said different ground contact times. These are done with a shorter ground contact time, these are done with a longer. But why are they different? Because they train different qualities. As we said, extensive are done with a shorter ground contact time, which means they train fluidity, they train rhythm, and they train reactive strength. Or, said in fitness terms, they are training the stretch shortening cycle, which in some intensive exercises also do, but extensive do it really, really well. For the intensive, they train maximum force output and maximum force generation through the lower body, upper body, depending on which type of what type of exercise you're doing. They are both really, really useful. Both of them can be done with maximal, submaximal effort, while extensive plyometrics are really medium to submaximal effort, and intensive plyometrics should always be max effort to make sure that you're actually doing what you have to do and you're not just jumping around wasting time. If you are completely new, maybe start with lower intensity, both on the extensive, on the intensive plyometrics, but when you get a little bit more advanced, you have to increase intensity in order to get the best possible results. The other category which we have is direction. This is also pretty self-explanatory. You can jump forward, you can jump up, you can jump back, you can jump to the side, but most people just train in one plane of motion, or they train in one direction without really changing the variety, changing the exercise they do depending on the direction. If you're a contact athlete, or you're someone who plays a high intensity sport, like let's say football, American football, soccer, or basketball, training laterally as well as horizontally and vertically will really improve you with will help you with improving your change of direction, improving your agility, and improving your capability to actually change direction a lot more, let's say a lot more efficiently, without wasting that much energy, and doing it fast, doing it sharp, and doing it explosive. This is something which a lot of athletes don't do and don't work on outside of their team training, but it's really important to also train to the side laterally to improve change of direction abilities and to be able to change direction better. Then we have resistance. That pretty much means the resistance or the force which is applied on the exercise. Just like with a squat, you can do a bodyweight squat, you can do an assisted squat, you can do a resisted by putting a barbell or increasing the weight on the barbell. So this is the resistance which is driving you down on the eccentric, and then you have to, in the concentric, you have to resist this external load. With plyometrics, it's pretty much the same thing, but there is a slight difference when it comes to assisted. I'm gonna get to it a little bit later. So we can do a body weight. Of course, plyometrics, most of them are done body weight, and for complete beginners, I wouldn't even recommend putting external resistance on any type of plyometric before you get used to the movement and before you know how to properly do the movement without getting injured. As I said, you can do them body weight and then you can do them resisted. How do you resist a plyometric? By putting weight or with using bands. If you're doing a counter movement jump, a vertical jump, you can put 2 dumbbells in your hands, start slow, of course. If you're doing a depth jump, if you're doing a drop jump, if you're doing a depth drop, of course, in all of them, you can put some type of resistance in the form of bands, in the form of dumbbells in your hands, or whatever you have available. You can use kettlebells, depending on the exercise. But if it's something which is more intensive and it's not in a vertical plane of motion, like let's say a broad jump, the more safe solution for putting external resistance will be to use a band rather than using weights, because it can be a little bit dangerous. So be cautious when putting resistance on plyometrics, but there is an option to do that as well. And then we get to the assisted part. There are exercises, plyometric exercises, which you can assist with using, let's say, a band, but you also have to be careful, because if you are doing a assisted vertical jump and the band is too strong, like the band is pulling you up really far, let's say you can jump 20 centimeters without using any bands. This is your max effort vertical jump, and when you use a band, you're jumping 40 centimeters up, which is completely possible if you use the strongest band you have available. You are going to create something which is called overspeed, or there are also other terms, but I like to use it because it's really what it is. When you put too much force on an assisted plyometric, it creates forces which you cannot normally create yourself. So you can normally jump 20 centimeters, but with using a super strong band, you can now jump 40 centimeters up. Sure, it's still assisted, but your body is not used to then absorbing this force, which is twice as higher. You have to keep this in mind, which is going to be twice as higher, or maybe 1.5 times because of the band, which is going to be 1.5 times higher than what you can normally absorb, because you're not used to jumping that high, because you simply cannot. So really you have to be cautious. If you're going to do an assisted plyometric, don't use the strongest band there are. Just use a slight band, which is going to help you on the way up, and it's not going to increase your vertical jump by 50%. So be careful with this. Then we have the focus of the plyometric. Now this is gonna change depending on the type of exercise you're doing, of course, but you still have to keep in mind what the focus of the actual exercise is. Sure, you're doing an extensive plyo, you're doing an intensive plyo, but you really have to know what this specific exercise is training and what is the number one goal which this exercise has. So it can be rhythm, deceleration, acceleration, top speed. You can really do an exercise just to activate your nervous system, which we can cover in another video. This is where the CNS comes in place. And I also have reactive strength and stretch shortening cycle. As I said, you can really do an exercise, or let's say you can really do an intensive exercise which targets some of those qualities, and you can have an extensive plyometric exercise which targets other qualities. You can't really pick what type of quality you're going to train with a specific exercise, because the specific exercise has set focuses or set targets or goals which it focuses on, right? You can't train, you can't do a broad jump and expect it to train your stretch shortening cycle. You can't really be, I mean, you can if you're doing a consecutive broad jump, like you're doing a triple, quadruple broad jump, but then really turns more into an intensive plyometric rather than an extensive one. It turns more into an extensive, rather than an intensive one. So you really have to be careful with what you want to get out of the exercise. And with this, you can really pick between extensive and intensive plyo. You can't really change it that much, but you still have to know what that exercise actually does. I hope this makes sense. I can also cover every single one of these in another video if you want me to. And then at the end we have, of course, the type of exercise you are gonna do and how you are gonna do it. We can have a bound, we can have a hop. As I said, we can have a jump, vertical, horizontal, lateral jump. But of course, this is also gonna depend on what exercise you pick, right? This is just, I also at the bottom have a contrast set and a PAP, which is post-activation potentiation, which means you can do a plyometric after you do a strength exercise in a similar movement pattern. Let's say you're doing a back squat, you rest for 30-40 seconds, and then you do a max effort vertical jump or a seated vertical jump, something which is in a similar plane of motion. What this does, if you want to get more scientific behind it, what this does is that when you're using resistance, when you're using weight in that specific plane of motion, and then you move into a plyometric, which is in a similar plane of motion. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but there has to be a lot of similarity. Like you can do a back squat and then do a single leg broad jump. And what this does is that it helps you then to absorb and create more force when you are doing the plyometric. I can cover it in more detail in another video because this video is gonna get too long, but this is pretty much the whole idea. When you understand the two type of exercises, extensive and intensive, then everything else becomes self-explanatory and it's really easy to use. So you can pinpoint one of these things which you want me to cover in more detail, but this is a general idea of what you can expect from plyometrics, how to use them, and I can also make another video when to use them and how to actually put them in a workout so that they are more effective than just doing them in a random place in your workout. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you have questions, drop them down below. See you in the next one.